Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to be doing episode 6 of Fantasy Genre Blends. If you haven't seen any of the previous videos, I will link the playlist for you guys so you can go back and watch them. But the gist is I enjoy fantasy, but I also like to read other genres, and sometimes reading fantasy books that are blended with other genres allows me to kind of tiptoe and figure out what I like about other genres before, fully diving in. And so I've been exploring a whole bunch of different fantasy blends. So we've done fantasy mystery, we've done fantasy thriller, fantasy horror, we've done fantasy romance, of course. So yeah, all things fantasy mixed with other things. Sometimes we've even had books that have had 3 or 4 like subgenres. So that's the goal. And these videos are split into 3 sections. I will first talk about the books that I had on my TBR from episode 5 and how they went. I will then talk about some other books that just popped up in my TBRs or from mood reading that fit the fantasy genre blend theme. And then thirdly, I will talk about 3 new books that I plan on reading to test out some new waters. The first book from episode 5 that we're going to talk about is The Helm of Midnight. So this was a fantasy slash horror slash maybe mystery as well. And this features 2 main characters that you follow. You follow I can't remember what they're called, but they're like the guardian of the realm, and they wear these masks that are imbued with different powers, and these powers come from these citizens who have died. So for instance, if you have a very, very great detective in this world and they have really good inductive, deductive reasoning skills, then at the time of their death, they can imbue a mask with all of the knowledge that this detective holds. And then anyone that wears that mask in the future essentially has those same skills. And so we follow one of the guardians of this kingdom, whose job is also to guard a specific mask. It's actually to guard like kind of a museum of artifacts, and one of the artifacts is a mask, a death mask of a serial killer who was like a notorious serial killer. He essentially killed people in very gruesome ways and terrorized the city for a little bit. Well, that mask goes missing and the killings start happening again. And the second character you follow is the serial killer from 10 years prior to when the mask goes missing. And so you kind of get to live out the life of the serial killer in the past timeline and figure out what's going on in the future timeline throughout the story as well. It was really intriguing, and if I haven't said this already, I rated this 4 stars. I really did enjoy it. Sadly, I picked up the second book in the series because it is a new release this year. It's called The Caged Dark Hours, I think it's The Caged Dark Hours, or The Cage of Dark Hours, maybe. I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can see it. I DNF'd this at 20%. So the first book I gave 4 stars. I absolutely enjoyed it. The second book, it focuses more, it just took a path that I didn't enjoy. I really enjoyed the serial killer aspect of the first book and that perspective, and that just wasn't present in the second book. In the second book, they focus more on some of the world building pieces that they didn't focus on in the first book, which normally I would enjoy, but for some reason I just lost interest. So I let this series go. But the first one I think is really good. Second one probably just depends on your taste. The second book from episode 5 is Fawkes. This is a recommendation from Jenny Chastain, and this was a fantasy mystery slash historical fiction, I guess. It would probably be more fantasy historical fiction slash mystery on the side. So you follow a boy named Fawkes, or a young man, I should say, named Fawkes, who is turning to stone, which is a plague that is happening on the land around them. And he is in the town that they are in, or in the world that they are in, people can control and use colors to change the world around them. So they learn the language of these colors, and then they also wear a mask, weirdly. I have 2 books that involve masks. And their masks are passed down or created by their fathers if you're a son, or by their mothers if you're a daughter. And as I said, Fawkes is turning to stone, and so he's trying to figure out a way to save himself, and he ends up getting mixed up into turmoil with his father and a possible assassination plot. And you're trying to figure out what's going on in the kingdom, but also what's causing the plague, and you get kind of thrown in with this cast of characters from this, I keep calling it a town, but it's definitely bigger than a town, this just community where you have two types of believers, I guess, in the different magic systems, which I won't spoil for you guys, but there are two belief systems on the form of magic that these people are using, that you get to see kind of the political side of both of those. This was fun. I think this was a YA. It read like a YA if it's not a YA. I rated this 3.5. I thought it was good. There were moments in the book where the pacing was a little off for me, and it read slower, and then there were some moments that I couldn't get enough of it. I really did enjoy the magic system. So if this is something that sounds interesting to you, I would say definitely pick it up, and thank you, Jenny, for the recommendation. Book number 3 from episode 5 is All the Birds in the Sky. So this is a book I was really excited about. It is following a mad scientist and a witch as they are children, and they are friends as they are children, and they have a falling apart, and then as they become adults, something happens in the world where they kind of have to join forces to try and save the world. So it sounds amazing. However, I DNF'd this. I don't remember what percent I was at, but I would say at least 20% in, if not more than that. I feel like I got to close to 50% if I remember correctly. But this book, while it sounds super fantastical and genre blendy as far as like sci-fi versus fantasy and how the two worlds are going to interact, it really is more about family dynamics and friendship dynamics and people growing out of who they used to be and changing. And that's just not what I wanted. So I have the same problem with this book as I had with The Changeling by Victor Lavalle, which both of these books have vastly different themes and different feelings. I don't know how else to express that. Tones. They have vastly different tones, I guess is what I should say. The Changeling is very, very dark and has a lot of sinister things going on in it. If you've never heard of this book, it follows a young couple who get married and their child, some weird things go down with their child. If you haven't heard of changelings, so technically goblins, come in and exchange your infant with a goblin, and then the child is taken into the goblin world. And so weird things start happening with the kid, and the hint is that, or like the book hints it being a changeling. I was super excited to read this book. I was 60% in when I DNF'd this, and there's no magic in it at all. It's not fantastical at all, at least in the 60% that I read. And I found the same thing with All the Birds in the Sky. I went into it with this high expectation of having this really fun world and seeing these fantastical characters come together, and it just didn't happen. So not for me, but I'm sure other people would enjoy it. So on to the books that I just ran across in my TBRs as the months went by. And this is probably not an all-encompassing list, but these are the ones that kind of came to my mind as I was making my notes for this video. So the first one is The Rook. I know I've talked about this in several videos recently, and so I won't talk about it so much in this video, but I just can't get over this book. It was fantastic. I already put a hold on the second book in the series. I know that I believe Nala from Here There Be Stories has said that she put this on her TBR because of one of the videos I did about it. And so Nala, if you read the first book and you want to read the second book with me, let me know. But if you haven't heard me rant and rave about this book, you follow Mythony, who wakes up in a body that is not hers, with no memories, surrounded by death. And she is given a choice The owner, or the person whose body she is inhabiting, has left her notes in her coat pocket, essentially saying that she has a choice. She can choose to live Mifmini's life, which is going to be challenging. She won't give her any other information. Or she can choose to cut and run and go and create her own life, all, with some resources that she has available. And the book follows her choices. This is one of the books that I said I might do a secondary video on. So I can talk a little bit about spoilers, but this is fantastic. Fantasy mystery. It is a little chunky, but it reads really fast, and it's like a race as you read through it. It's so action-packed, and the world is so cool. Oh, and I also didn't say, but the Rook, I rated 5 stars, if that wasn't apparent. The next book that came across my TBR was Thornhedge, and I've talked about this in a recent video as well. There's also a vlog coming out about this book and my reactions to it. This is a Kingfisher. I rated this 5 stars. This is a fantasy horror, and it's a dark fairy tale, I guess. It's not super dark, and so I would say for horror readers, this is definitely light on the horror. But it still fits, and I absolutely love the story. It is so cute. It's very, very short, so I don't want to give you a ton of information about it, but you follow a toad-shaped heroine, is how the synopsis describes her, and she is guarding a tower, and you follow her story in protecting this tower, why she's protecting it, who she's protecting it from. And this is a fairy tale retelling of Sleeping Beauty, roughly. So, on to the 3 books that I'm adding to my TBR for fantasy genre blends. And the first I already talked about in my September TBR. This is Stranger Times. Sorry, I'm trying to prevent the glare for you guys. So Stranger Times is a book that features essentially a news organization. So think New York Times. But the world that they're in is fantastical, and the journalist gets involved in some kind of trickery or some type of mystery. So this is fantasy mystery. And that's kind of all I know. I'm really intrigued to see where this goes. And this is my next physical read that I'm picking up. The next book I'm adding to my TBR is called The Hanging City. I haven't heard anyone talk about this. This is a new release. I believe it came out in August. And the first thing that caught me, so this is fantasy romance, which is not like my primary genre. I don't mind romance. I don't stray away from romance, but it's definitely not something that calls to me. However, this is about a goblin city. And for whatever reason, I am fascinated with goblins. I want to read more and more books about goblins, and this is one of them. So this book follows a girl who, I believe her name is Lark, and she has the ability to control fear. So I think she can imbue fear into people, and she also is on the run from, I believe, a home situation that's not great, and she seeks refuge in a goblin city, specifically, I think, the Hanging Goblin City. And she essentially has to trade on her abilities, and which could potentially make her like a traitor to humankind. I don't know. It sounds fantastic, and I'm very surprised I haven't heard anybody talk about it. I found it like just scrolling through Goodreads, and I'm really excited to pick this one up. The last book that I'm adding to my TBR for this episode is one that's been on my radar for a long time, and that is The Blacktongue Thief. So this book is fantasy horror, and it follows a thief, which I think is something I'm starting to learn that I am interested in. Thief, espionage, anything kind of like that where people are learning about how to use magic in a way to trick people and deceive people, I think is fascinating. And the thief in this book apparently runs across it was like the guardian of the goddess of death or something. I read this synopsis a little bit ago. But it sounded really creepy. It sounds like the world has krakens and trolls and giants in it, and there's all these dark, sinister things happening in the world, and it sounds like a place I want to be. So I'm really excited about this one. I've heard a lot of people talk about this book, so it's not new news, but I'm excited to get to another fantasy horror. So those are my new picks for fantasy genre blends. If you guys have any recommendations for me, especially for fantasy horror, I have such a hard time finding books that are horror but not based in the real world. I would like horror novels that are based in fantastical worlds, like where there's krakens and things like that. So if you have any recommendations, please, please, please let me know. It doesn't have to be fantasy horror. It can be fantasy mystery. I also have a hard time finding those. Fantasy romance, if you have any favorites, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to add to my list for future episodes. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.